just got to remember which is in.
Really? You never heard this? No, there's a trick.
Is that right?
I don't know why. This button right here, it's the same one.
Did Wendy go to a trophy? I think she must have. Oh, good.
Depending which way you...
Hi there, I'm Greg Miller, and welcome to class number 5 of the guitar class. This week we're going to be having a little look at how to develop your speed and your accuracy when you're playing scales, and it kind of carries over into chord playing and stuff like that too. The first thing I wanted to show you was some stretching exercises that I've learned. One of them is kind of weird. What you do is you make your you take your hands and put them together like that, like praying hands, and you put them behind your back. Let me see if I can turn myself around for this. And you just touch your fingertips together and slide up your back like that until your fingertips are as high up the back, even close to your hairline as you can get them. And try to press the palms of your hands together. And you'll feel it stretch in here and in here, and I feel it really work in here. And what it does is it loosens up the muscles in your pinky, which is generally your tensest, weakest finger. And it kind of relaxes your whole hand. It may hurt the first few times, but you'll learn to like it. And then what you should do is to curl your fingers in from the first knuckles and bring them in really tight and make a fist and bend your fists down and move them around like that, and you can feel the muscles in your forearms stretching and stuff like that. And it's really good to, just like an athlete would, warm up before they actually do any kind of competition or hard work. It's good to warm your hands up before you play. You're not going to really, blow a muscle or anything like that, but it's just a little easier on your hands. And when you sit down to play, you sort of feel better because your hands don't feel like they've been in ice water for a year. Another one is more of an exercise to play on the guitar, and we looked at it a few lessons ago. It's a real simple pattern, and all you're going to do is place your 4 fingers over the fingerboard and play each consecutive note and then move to the next string. And backwards. The scale it's not really a scale, it has no musical value really. It's just a pattern that you play on the guitar to get your fingers going. And I've written it out on this worksheet over here, and it's just labeled as the speed exercise. And as you can see, you just play from the lowest note to the highest note, just consecutively. And so it's fairly simple, it's not too difficult to remember. What you should do with it is when you're playing it, you should play it through in one position, ascending and descending, and then move up 1 fret and play the whole thing all over again. And move up 1 fret and play the whole thing all over again. And keep doing it all the way up the neck until your hand starts to waver and falter. Usually you might get up to the 9th or 10th fret, and your fingers will start to freak out and lock. Try to do each note as clear as possible and make each note ring for the same duration of time. And once you get up there, your hand will feel kind of strange, and do that exercise where you put your fingers together and bend your wrist around. And I found that helped my speed and how smooth I picked up and down a lot when I started doing that. And if you do that once every day, you should notice a definite increase in your speed, or a definite change in your in the smoothness of your picking pattern over the course of about a week. So you can do that this week. I'll show you a couple of different musical examples. One of them being a scale. It's just a form of a major scale, and another one being an arpeggio. All that an arpeggio is the notes in a chord, like that G major chord, except you play them one at a time instead of hearing them all simultaneously. That's all an arpeggio is. I've written this scale out on the worksheet again too, and it's labeled Major Scale Form 3. And you can see there that you just read it like we've read all these other sheets. If you want, you can send me a self-addressed stamped envelope to the address at the end of the show here, and I'll send you out all these lessons so that you can have these pieces of paper in front of you when you're watching. The scale labeled Major Scale Form 3 is just another major scale, and you just play it like all the other ones. And the different thing about this scale is that the roots of the scale, being the notes with the lines through them, are not the lowest note and the highest note of the scale. All the other scales we've looked at have had their lowest note as the root and the highest note as the root, like this major scale, G major scale. Starts on a root and ends on a root. This scale, the root is on the B string and on the A string. So when you play it, if you start at the very lowest note that's written down there and end on the very highest note that's written down, it won't sound like a major scale, even though it is. So when you play it, keep in mind that it's going to sound a bit different, but don't let it bother you that it doesn't sound like a major scale. Really what's happening with the scale is you're playing just a small portion of a much larger scale that spans the whole length of the neck and really spans the whole frequency range covered by every instrument. A piano can go much lower than a guitar, and a violin can go much higher than a guitar. So this little window that you're playing can be extended down to the lowest note by just walking up the low E string and then falling into the pattern and finishing off the scale, moving up the neck. And I'm just going to use this scale as an example because it's real easy to finger, and it's really easy a scale to practice to develop your picking. The most important thing about getting your speed up, I think, is to make sure that your picking is consistent and it's moving, your pick's moving up and down at a really consistent time frame. You don't want to force the pick and speed it up. You're going to sound erratic and jerky like that. You pick basically at a higher velocity the same way that you do at a lower speed. When you pick slow, it's easy to concentrate on each note and to have the pick run on and off the string properly. When you speed up, you just have to develop a feel for it, and that just comes with practicing these scales over and over. The angle of your pick will really change how smooth the scale sounds as well. If you hold the pick, this is against my black shirt, but if you hold the pick when it strikes the string like that, the pick will tend to hang up on the string. If you just angle your pick a little bit so that the point of it is pointing toward the neck slightly, the pick will tend to roll off the string a lot easier. So in your hand, instead of having it come directly out of your hand like that, angle it forward a little bit so it's pointing up. It's pointing toward the neck. And when you play, you won't have as much of the pick caught under the string to get out of the way. You can change a lot of the way the guitar sounds by the angle that you hold the pick at. For chords as well too, some people use the back end of the pick when it's got this little rough spot on it. And you hear kind of a scrapey sort of a sound. So that's one of a million places that you can change the tone of the guitar. The other thing I wanted to talk about was that arpeggio, which is written down on this worksheet as well. And like I said, this is just a major arpeggio. These read a little bit differently than scales. You still want to play the notes from the lowest note in the scale to the highest note in the scale. But they're very spread out looking. So just let your ear tell you which note should come next, and just trust your ear, because it'll probably be right. And the way it should sound and that would be the same as playing a major chord. You're just picking the notes one at a time instead of letting them sustain and hearing them as a block chord. People like Joe Satriani and Steve Vai use a lot of arpeggios. When you play them quick, they tend to sound, because they're kind of classical or something like that. I'll put some dirt on this. This will just be the same arpeggio, one in the key of, or one being an A major arpeggio and another one being a D major arpeggio. You can get changes in the way that these arpeggios sound, because the notes are so far apart on the strings. A lot of times you can slide into the note from way below or from the note that you played previous, and you'll give the whole line kind of a more sweeping kind of a feel. It'll move along. Like when you play the first two notes and you go to the third note, you can anchor your hand with your pinky finger and sort of pull your whole hand up to play that D right there. And then just flatten your index finger out to play the note underneath it. And then reach up with your pinky and pull your whole hand up again so that your index finger can play this D, and play the final note with your middle finger. When you go backwards, you may want to change the fingering a bit. But if you use those same fingers, they're the most logical. You have the biggest spread between your index and pinky. So when you're doing a major stretch like that, it just makes sense to use those two fingers for it. And those slides I was talking about, you can slide from any of these notes up to another note. And sometimes they're called grace notes, and they don't have so much to do with the theory behind the scale or the theory behind the arpeggio. What they do is they're sort of flowery, and they let you slip from note to note. If you have to make a big jump between two notes, you can put a grace note in the middle, and it'll kind of connect the two together. So instead of playing, you could play. And when I was playing that stuff quickly, I was just doing it unconsciously, sliding up to those notes. It just makes it sound a little less like a rudiment or a scale, and a little more like a piece of music, which is always good. You may find after a while that playing these arpeggios, that the second note in the arpeggio is picked the way it's written here. It will smoothen the whole arpeggio out if you pick the first note and hammer the third one on. As opposed to. And it's a little easier on your right hand too if you want to get this arpeggio up to speed, but your right hand won't pick at the speed that you're trying to work at. For arpeggios and for scales that are real long like this, meaning that they're stretched out the neck instead of going up the neck and staying in the same position, move out of position to play this, it's a good idea to find target notes inside whatever phrase or scale or arpeggio that you're playing. And the best target notes when you're playing something like this are the roots. if you can locate the root, you should try to keep your eye on it, sort of one eye on it and your other eye on your other fingers. And it's a good idea to memorize certain notes on the neck. You don't have to memorize every one. You'll eventually know them. But if you pick a few points on the neck to memorize, you can just fill the blanks in between later on. And just a good rule of thumb, on the low E and A string, you should memorize the notes at the dots. And if you don't know how to count up the neck, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, send me that envelope with your name and address on it, and I'll send you out a note line, and it'll explain how to do that kind of stuff. It's kind of something you might have to look at for a little while. There's a couple things you have to memorize. And even if you don't know those notes, and you know the pattern that you're playing, like this arpeggio, find that note before you start playing it, and kind of burn it in your mind. Understand that that's the note that you're going to have to end up on, and you're going to have to end up on it with your middle finger. And when you do finally hit that last note, you know for sure that it's the last one. Even if you make a mistake in the middle, if you hit that last note with some, make it sound like you know what you're doing, even if you don't. People will tend to think that you do. You can get away with a lot that way. Those hammer-ons are also combined with something known as pull-offs. That's when you don't pick the note. You pick the first note, and you'll pull a note off. So you'll hammer, pull, hammer, pull, hammer, pull, hammer, pull. And a good example of people doing that is when people finger tap. That's all that it is a hammer-on and a pull-off, and a hammer-on and a pull-off. That kind of technique takes a bit of practice. You have to be using two scales at one time, or thinking about things in a different way. But to use that technique with one hand inside of a scale, if you take that form 3 major scale that we looked at, and you take the first 3 notes and the second 3 and these 2, you can pull them off on the way down and hammer them on the way up. And if you play a scale like that all the time, it'll sound like you don't know how to pick. So don't do it all the time. It's a real nice idea to be able to combine the two. To pull those first 3 off, or to hammer in the middle of the scale, to just not randomly, but at the beginning randomly, just pull a few notes off and then continue picking the scale through, or hammer a few notes on and continue picking the scale through, which is what a lot of guitar players that you listen to and play real quick, they're doing that in the middle of the scale anyway. Like if you hear I pulled that whole line off, basically pulled it off and hammered it on by only picking one note on each string. And when you do that, it's referred to as legato, is the Latin term for it. I think it's Latin. And it makes your playing sound smoother. You don't hear that attack from the pick. Joe Satriani, like I mentioned, people like that will do it, and you can make it almost sound medieval or Middle Eastern or something like that. If you play just those 3 notes on the B string and those 3 notes on the E string, and you pick the string once and hammer the other 2 notes, pick the E string once and hammer those two notes, and then go backwards, you can end up sounding and it takes on a bit of a different flavor then. And you can also make the notes shorten the duration between the notes up a lot more. You can sound faster than you really are. A lot of people practice scales and still have a real problem getting their left and right hand to play at the same speed. And you can do these kind of exercises. But one technique that I found works really, really good is to play a scale with your left hand. Pick any scale. Pick a scale that you know, the scale that you know the best, so that you don't have to concentrate on remembering the scale or thinking that maybe you're not playing it right. And just pick with your right hand as fast as you can go. In control. Like, don't be going crazy. Pick as fast as you think you could possibly play. And just, even if it sounds terrible like that, and you don't hear anything, just keep doing it. And pretty soon your left and right hand will sync up. And you'll be able to hear points in the scale where your two hands will sync together, and you'll play all the right notes, and then they'll go apart again, and you'll hear all muted notes, and then they'll come back in and go apart. And the more you do that, when you hear those notes come together, just try to think about why they're coming together. Look at the position of your hand and look at the part of the scale. Is it a part of the scale that you know better than another part of the scale? And it's a little crazy to keep that going because it sounds real bad. But that technique will link your left and right hand together and make playing funkier kind of chord progressions much easier, because you get some independent control over your two hands, while your right hand's just moving up and down like that, even with the scale. Your left hand can bend a note. It can slide from note to note. Can use those hammer-ons and pull-offs inside of it, not having to think about your right hand moving up and down constantly. So it just becomes just a habit. So maybe for this week, work on that fingering exercise, alternate picking it up and down all the time, from bottom to top. Practice that major scale. And remember to always practice them ascending, meaning from the lowest note to the highest note, and descending again down to the bottom. And work on those arpeggios. You can apply the same sort of technique to playing those practicing those arpeggios as you did to that picking exercise by moving it up a fret. Playing the arpeggio at one fret, and then going and playing it at another fret. And just crawling up the neck slowly. And you'll hear a real, almost like an orchestra, kind of moving up and up and up and up and building tension. You'll hear. And it'll never seem to go anywhere, but eventually we'll talk about how to resolve those kind of things and make them sound better. And well, send me an envelope with your name and a stamp and your address on it, and I'll send you these lessons out so you can look at them on paper. And I think that's all I have to say this week. So have a good time practicing this week, and I'll see you in 7 days.